Say yes if you know who Hans Monderman is. No, okay. And don't feel bad, because the fact that these people are not familiar is kind of proving my point that trust is deprecated. We sort of push it aside, we ignore it. A lot of my heroes were pushed aside in their disciplines. So Hans Monderman is in the field of urban design and transportation planning. I got to meet him in 2006. His Wikipedia picture, which I have here, is a picture I took. So my photograph is on Wikipedia. And occasionally I'll get an email that says, I also posted some videos back then to YouTube of him walking and explaining what was happening in Drachten, a little town in the Netherlands, which he had helped redesign a lot of streets and intersections in. And so I occasionally get requests to use those materials in a documentary or something else. But his heresy is, all those traffic signs and all the affordances that we put and paint and put around intersections and streets to try to make things safer, make things less safe. It's weird. It's counterintuitive. He said, look, why don't we design streets and intersections carefully and then trust people to make eye contact through the intersections, and then when you match pace with somebody, you make your way through. It works just fine. So roundabouts happen a lot. He didn't necessarily love roundabouts. But traffic calm, what this is called is traffic calming or shared spaces. And what happens is injury rates go down. In fact, again, traffic calmed intersections look a little bit dangerous and confusing, which means drivers naturally slow down. But they don't have to come to a stop. Like, you don't have a situation in any place where Hans has touched. Half the people aren't sitting waiting at a red light, waiting for things to happen while their engine burns, carbon products. So what happens is when you do this, the injury rate actually goes down, throughput stays high, but it seems very counterintuitive. It's like, how could safety measures not work? What it does also is it treats people not just as drivers versus pedestrians and bicyclists, but it treats them as citizens in the same shared space. That's why the name shared spaces has sort of come up in this way. He had a really interesting method of propagating the idea, and mostly across Holland, although this movement picked up in Australia and England, and now it's happening all over the world in little places. But his method was, he would go to a new town, and he would never go to the traffic department or the transportation people, because the transportation people in Holland know exactly what you do to do an intersection, because the EU has mandated you use this color paint, this many centimeters from the sidewalk, you do this and this, the lights should be this model light. Everything is standardized and predicted, and he's trying to undo that. So he would go to other people who were in charge of planning for the city, and he would approach them and explain the process, and then give them a tour, a walking tour and a driving tour of other towns where this had already happened. And then, and I find this really fascinating, he would go away for 3 or 4 months, because he knew that this counterintuitive idea had to gestate. It had to sit with people and it had to sink in, and they had to talk to their family. They had to go drive the town themselves. They had to talk amongst themselves. And then he'd come back and check in with them and say, well, what do you think? And very often they'd be like, we're done, we're convinced. And then they would sit down for some very careful planning, because like these other things based on trust, they take thoughtful design. You really have to sort of redesign streets and intersections, thinking about how they read to a driver and a pedestrian and everybody else. But I love this movement, and I've been a big fan.